They knew the why. They knew Flynn. Do you find it weird that the only person Barack Obama talks to President-elect Trump when Obama's the president, Trump's won the election, there's that transition period, the only person Obama mentions is Flynn? So, folks, it's not just that they wanted Flynn out. It's not just that entities within our own government, the Pentagon, deep staters, Brennan, and intelligence officials appeared to collude with the media to set up and frame and entrap Flynn repeatedly. It's that the media colluded and willingly played along. There's only two scenarios for what the media did here. They were either one, useful idiots, or two, malicious tools. There is no option C. What do I mean by that? Again, hat tip 279 on this one. I want you to look back to this Washington Post article, but pay very, very close attention to the date. This is by the hapless Greg Miller and police state supporting Ellen Nakashima. They love the police. These are two Soviets here who love it. They're, again, Miller last night was still defending this because he's not a journalist. He's a fraud, a phony, and basically a Soviet supporting Pravda-like fake news journalist who couldn't argue his way out of a wet paper bag. But Miller, I hit him pretty hard on Twitter last night because he's a loser and he deserved it. So he writes this at the Washington Post. The FBI reviewed Flynn's calls with the Russian ambassador, but found nothing illicit. Oh, look at the date. Keep that. No. Keep that. Look at the date. Oh, isn't this date a gem? January 23rd of 2017. You may say, Dan, I don't get it. So these two Washington Post hacks, fake newsers, they're writing that Flynn didn't do anything wrong? Well, what happens January 24th, the next day? Oh, the ambush interview at the White House. Many of you are putting it together right now. Of course, the liberals, if you're still watching, despite me begging you to get off my show because I can't stand you today, if you're still watching because you like to be humiliated, the day before the Washington Post gets this leak that Joe clearly probably put Mike Flynn at ease. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
Flynn, look at this article in the Post. We found nothing illicit. Big wink and a nod. Don't you worry. That way, the next day when they ambush interview him at the White House, Flynn, who's obviously seen this article, it is the Washington Compost, which sadly some people still read. Flynn's probably read the article. And he's like, yeah, sure. I'll talk to these FBI guys. There's nothing wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. Now he's got the Washington Post and these two useful idiots, Greg Miller and Nakashima. He's got them attesting to the fact that he did nothing wrong. They were setting him up.
Yep.
It is clear as day to anyone who has followed these useful idiots in the media. They either knew what they were doing or they were useful idiots to the FBI folks that leaked that to the Washington Post to get Flynn to let his guard down. So when they interview ambush him the next day, Flynn will think nothing's wrong and won't request a lawyer and won't request that they go through White House counsel. How's everybody missing this? Outside of 279, a couple others, nobody picked up on this yesterday. That article is damning. Ladies and gentlemen, both of these things can't be true. The article in the Washington Post, there was nothing illicit about the calls, can't be true if the next day the FBI went to interview Flynn about illicit calls. Those things can't be true. Both of those things can't exist. Either they were illicit or they weren't. And if they weren't illicit, what the hell were they talking to Flynn about the next day? And you should be asking yourself, why would they leak that to two useful idiots in the media like Nakashima and Miller? Because they knew they'd print it, and they knew Flynn would read it, and they knew Flynn's guard down. You know, someone tweeted something last night. Forgive me. Oh, Svetlana Lakova, who, again, read the excellent book, The Spider. I can't recommend it. Who's been a victim of all this as well. Halper, the targeting, the Pentagon ONA targeting, the intelligence community targeting. She tweeted last night, and this is really serious. It's not going to be a lot of sarcasm in today's show. She says, the saddest part about this whole thing is that General Flynn, when those FBI agents showed up the next day after that article, the saddest part of this whole thing is he viewed them as allies. It's this whole thing is devastating, folks. I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound like overly emotional, but it really is. I didn't sleep like all night. I can't even imagine in my 12 years as a federal agent doing this to somebody. I can't even imagine. And the fact that liberal blue check marks like that complete zero police state Soviet Benjamin Witty's, Comey's acolyte, Comey's bootlicker, that all these liberal media alleged lawyers, they're not real lawyers, they're fake lawyers. Their law degrees mean nothing. That they're out on Twitter today celebrating this. Oh, Trump world, this is no big deal. The FBI does this all the time. If they do, then we have to disband the FBI. I'm telling you, they don't do this all the time. I work with them. Listen, I am not absolving anybody of guilt here. My experience in this matters. I work with them often. And I specifically remember a case I worked that involved some tax charges where the FBI guy I work with and his boss. I'm not saying that it's there are obviously bad apples over there. Sadly, a lot of them. There are bad apples everywhere. But the guys I work with wanted everything done by the book. I remember it literally by the book, not Susan Rice by the book. They said we have to go through TIGTA. We have to get this. Tax records are difficult. My experience, I'm only speaking from my experience, was a good one. What's happened here at the management level and with people who failed to speak out is a disgrace, and the FBI needs a major overhaul. I'm very sorry to have to tell you that. But the fact that Flynn viewed them as allies, made the mistake of thinking his own government's law enforcement entity were Team America, not Team Target Mike Flynn, find a crime later. That was his greatest mistake. Now, in case you don't believe me, by the way, so now we know the Washington Post was in on this. Whether they knew it or not, or were useful idiots, candidly is irrelevant. The Washington Post was used to put Flynn at ease. But I just want to show you as well as the left-wing media outlet knew about this the whole time. The left-wing media outlets knew Flynn was a target. And instead of scratching their heads and saying, well, these charges, the Logan Act and lying to federal agents, these seem rather loose for a guy as decorated as Mike Flynn. Maybe we should ask questions, given that Obama didn't like him. They can't feign ignorance. Of course, I always produce the evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the New York Times themselves. They can't say, well, we didn't know about a potential motive Obama would have had to target Mike Flynn. Really? May 2017, New York Times. Michael Shear. Obama warned Trump about hiring Flynn, officials say. They knew. These people knew the whole time. They knew the why. They knew Flynn. Do you find it weird that the only person Barack Obama talks to President-elect Trump when Obama's the president, Trump's won the election, there's that transition period, the only person Obama mentions is Flynn? Maybe because rewinding to the beginning, Flynn was going to expose his Iran deal, his failures in Afghanistan, and the use of politics and intelligence to target their political enemies. Flynn was public enemy number one. He had to go down, and Obama knew it. Folks, you have to remember, Obama never expected to lose the election, ever. With Hillary, that is. Of course, he wasn't running a third time. But he expected his legacy and his tyranny to be preserved by a Hillary Clinton presidency. Nobody on this planet expected Trump to win. Not one pollster. Obama starts sniffing out that this is going to come out. And he knows Flynn is going to be the Paul Revere. And Flynn had to be taken down. Not only that, the effort to take down Flynn, which began in 2015 when Obama is still the president, had to be covered up. The ONA contracts, Halper's role in the UK setup with Flynn and Lakova, that all had to be covered up.
You just heard The Dan Bongino Show. You can also get Dan's podcasts on iTunes or SoundCloud. And follow Dan on Twitter 24/7 @DBongino.